How do you celebrate a city's birthday? With candles and cakes and flying cars and monorails. These have all been elements of Columbus's birthday celebrations, because whenever Columbus has observed these landmarks, it's been an opportunity to imagine what the future holds. In 1912, as the city was celebrating its centennial, the view of the future was better than the view out the window.
The city along the riverfront was anything but beautiful. There are tenement houses, there are multiple prison sites, there are factories.
Rivers in those days weren't considered places of recreation. They were a resource where you either took water out, or once you got something dirty, you dumped the water in.
Billy Ireland has a cartoon about the National Road coming into Columbus from the west, and is this the gateway we want to see for visitors coming to our city? Let's clean this up.
Columbus had grown two ways in its first century, remarkably and haphazardly. But just before the centennial, the city was inspired to create a vision for the future.
The 1908 plan for Columbus grew out of what was called the City Beautiful movement that really was triggered by the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. It tried to inspire people to make better cities. The idea was if you made a city livable and beautiful and walkable, it would improve the civic character of the people.
The 1908 plan defined Columbus as an industrial city, a state capital, and an education center. And it challenged Columbus to become the most beautiful and well-ordered state capital in the country.
The original renderings would have had the State House as the focal point on the eastern end, and then a building here on the west side of the river as the western edge, with a big grassy esplanade in the middle, with all the public buildings lining either side of it all the way down across the river.
And people agreed that it was a good-looking plan. It would have remade the city in a positive way, but there was opposition in the media and elsewhere to the cost of the plan, and nothing really ever happened. And then all of a sudden in 1913 was the flood in the spring of that year that did huge damage in downtown Columbus as well as Dayton and other cities. And it basically wiped out the riverfront. It took out the bridges, it took out a lot of the buildings, a lot of people lost their lives, both on the east and the west sides of the river.
It prompted citizens and civic leaders of Columbus to take a good, long, hard look at the river.
And what resulted was the Civic Center plan. Now it took close to 50 years to implement it. From the time of the flood to the time it was finally built out with the final two state buildings in the mid-1960s, it took almost 50 years.
In the 1912 centennial, Columbus celebrated its status as a crossroads community that bridged east and west. In 1962, Columbus saw itself at a different kind of crossroads. The city was at the crossroads of the 20th century. In German Village, visionaries saw the future by seeing the potential in the old South End, an old neighborhood which was nearly abandoned. And in an era when the Levesque Tower was the only skyscraper in town, many architects had imaginative designs on the future.
Some interesting articles came out showing designs from some of the major architectural firms in town. And I have to say they were sort of space age and a little strange new buildings of odd shapes that kind of looked like spaceships that had landed somewhere in Columbus.
Other fanciful predictions for Columbus were published in a sesquicentennial newspaper special. Experts imagined that by the year 2000, the Ohio Penitentiary would be replaced by a transportation center. Instead, we got the remains of Union Station. We didn't get the predicted Spindletop restaurant downtown, but the Kahiki was fun while it lasted.
And you began to see a lot of commercial innovation in Columbus. This is where the first Wendy's opened. Bob Evans Farms began down in southern Ohio, but they moved their headquarters to Columbus in the 60s. In addition, the Limited began. It was a single store in the Kingsdale Shopping Center in the 60s.
Now it's 2012, and for its bicentennial, Columbus has honored the river that was the very reason for its being. Just completed, the Scioto Mile shines and sparkles just a stone's throw from where Lucas Sullivan established Franklinton. It's a riverfront renovation we've been talking about for a century.
The 1908 plan, like most plans, it sparked a vision, it created excitement, it created ideas, and even though many of those ideas were never fulfilled in their identical and exact way they were presented, it certainly provided a direction and a vision that the people of Columbus saw to some finish.
What's really interesting looking at Columbus today is how much life comes full circle. History does repeat itself. Take the Cap in the short north, the piece of land they put over top the freeway to hide the noise and traffic and dust and everything, because people didn't like walking across that big gap that we had between the downtown and the short north. That was even designed after the arcade from the old Union Station. When they built the Union Station, people didn't like the dirty smoke from the trains and the noise, and they wanted a nice walk to their neighborhood. So they built an arcade that went across and hid all that and put shops in it, and that's exactly what our Cap is today.
The Columbus we live in was shaped by the dreams and visions imagined a century ago by people who were celebrating the spectacular achievements of a frontier settlement that became a commercial crossroads. And 100 years from now, people will celebrate Columbus's tricentennial in the city we are imagining and building today.
People want to live now in a cool city. They can live anywhere they want to, but they're picking their cities now rather than their jobs. Our city's really taken 200 years to get to this place, but I think it's an amazing place we've gotten to.